Good morning, students. Today we shall take up the topic variable and its types. This topic is, you can say, ABC of research. It is a very fundamental, or you can say basic topic in research. So let's start. So first of all, we should try to understand what is variable. So variable is defined as a characteristic or an attribute that can take two or more than two values. So a variable is anything, any characteristic, or it can be an attribute that can take many values, at least two or more than two values. So this is what a variable is in research. So now let's try to understand different type of variables that are there in research. So the first type of variable is independent variable. Independent variable is also known as stimulus variable. So what is independent variable? Independent variable is any aspect of environment. So first of all, independent variable is an aspect of environment. It can be any aspect of environment. Second thing about independent variable is that independent variable is that that aspect of environment which the experimenter systematically and scientifically studies in an experiment. Then independent variable, what experimenter, or you can say researcher, does in research, he manipulates independent variable in order to see its effect on dependent variable. So researcher manipulates independent variable in order to see its effect. When independent variable is being manipulated, then is it having any kind of impact on dependent variable, and in case if it is having impact or influence, then what sort of effect it is having on dependent variable. So this is what independent variable is. And it is an aspect of environment. And the second thing is that the independent variable, the researcher, or you can say experimenter, manipulates it in research. Then independent variable is further divided into two parts. The first category of independent variable is E-type variable. So here E stands for experimental. So what are E-type independent variable? So E-type independent variable are those independent variable which the experimenter directly, or you can say experimentally, manipulates. For example, for example, take the example of noise. Noise is is an independent variable. It is a part of our environment. So this independent, so what experimenter or researcher can directly, or you can say experimentally, manipulate it. We can, for example, if there is noise in a room, then we can make that room soundproof. So that will be making a room full of noise soundful will be an example of E-type independent variable, because here what we have done, we have manipulated the variable experimentally or directly, and that is why it is known as E-type. Experimentally, or you can say directly. Here we are manipulating. So how we are manipulating? we are manipulating independent variable directly. So this classification of E type and S type is based on the mode of manipulation. When independent variable is being directly, or you can say experimentally manipulated, then it is our E type variable. And the second type of independent variables are known as S type independent variable. So what are S type independent variable? So any independent variable that is being indirectly manipulated, or you can say, so what does indirectly manipulation means here? Indirectly means when it is not feasible or viable for us to directly manipulate a variable, then we resort to indirect techniques. So what are indirect techniques? Here indirect techniques through selection. So that is why it is termed as S type. Here S means selection. So when we manipulate a variable indirectly, or you can say through selection, that is known as S type independent variable. For example, gender is a independent variable, and that is a S type independent variable, because we can't manipulate, we can't change a person's gender. That is inherent, that is innate. So it is something that we can't directly manipulate it, so we have to indirectly manipulate it, that is through selection. So this is what S type independent variables are. Now let's come on to the second type of variable, which are known as dependent variable. Now dependent variables are basically, they are also known as response variable or behavioral variables. So why they are termed as behavioral or response variable? Because dependent variable is dependent variable is the response, or you can say the behavior of the subject or the participant. So dependent variable here is whatever response or behavior the participant or the subject does or makes, that is known as a dependent variable. And dependent variable is it is a well defined aspect of behavior. And so what the researcher or experimenter does, he tries to measure the response, or you can say behavior. So dependent variable is a variable which is being measured by the experimenter. As far as independent variable is concerned, experimenter or researcher manipulates it. It can be direct manipulation or it can be indirect manipulation, whereas dependent variable, as far as dependent variable is concerned, the researcher measures it. And in the dependent variable is the response or behavior of the subject. So this is what dependent variable is. So the response, or you can say the behavior of the subject can be measured in different modalities. For example, the first characteristic of or you can say modality is the intensity of behavior. For example, if a person is knocking at the door, then the knocking is a kind of auditory stimulus. So to that auditory stimulus, so whenever there is you sense that someone is knocking at the door, then the moment you realize that there is knocking at the door, you start walking towards the door in order to see who is at the door. So that the swiftness or briskness of your walking, or you can say the intensity of your walking, that is known as the first modality, or you can say attribute, that is strength or magnitude of a response. The second thing is duration. So if a response or behavior has occurred, then for what time duration it has occurred, how much time it has lasted. So this is what duration of a response is. Then the third is latency of a response. So what does latency means? Latency is defined as a time interval or time duration between the presentation of a stimulus and execution of response towards that stimulus. So the time that lapses between the presentation of a stimulus and the execution of response towards that stimulus, that is known as the latency of a behavior. Then final attribute or characteristic that we measure of a behavior is it is the frequency. So if a behavior is occurring, then how frequent, how often that behavior is occurring. So that is what frequency is. Is it once in a while, or is it often, is it more than often? So how frequently that behavior is occurring. So these characteristics or attributes of a behavior or response that we measure, that the experimenter or researcher measures in a dependent variable. So now let's move on to the third type of variables, which are extraneous variables. So what are extraneous variables? So any variable except independent variable and dependent variable in an experiment are known as extraneous variable. So what extraneous variable do in an experiment, they are extraneous variables are basically unwanted, and they contaminate, or you can say they create biasness in results. So they decrease the credibility of our results. So what experimenter tries to do in an experiment, he tries to control extraneous variables in order to single out the effect of independent variable on the dependent variable. Until and unless we control extraneous variable in an experiment, we can't claim with certainty that whatever effect has been observed on the dependent variable after manipulating the independent variable, we can't claim with certainty that the effect that has come, it is the sole effect of independent variable, because any other variable, because at a given moment of time there are infinite number of variables that are there in the environment which keeps on operating. So what we have to do, we have to isolate, or you can say single out the effect of independent variable, so we can exclusively see the effect of independent variable on dependent variable. Otherwise we won't be sure ki which variable has caused the effect. It can be any variable. As I mentioned, there are n number of variables. For example, let me give an example. Suppose we are interested in observing the effect of reward on learning. So here reward is an example of independent variable, because we are interested in studying the effect of reward. So then learning is an example of learning is our dependent variable, because we are interested in seeing or you can say measuring learning in the experiment. So we are interested in seeing the effect of reward on learning. So here learning is a dependent, or you can say behavioral or response variable, whereas reward is is an aspect of environment, and as I have recently mentioned, that independent variable is an aspect of environment. So here reward can be of any type. It can be concrete reward, it can be abstract reward. For example, money is an example of concrete reward, whereas a kind of satisfaction that we derive, self satisfaction, so that is something abstract reward. So here we are interested to see the effect of reward on learning. But apart from reward, there are infinite number of variables that are operating. For example, we take two groups, and in an experiment there are two kind of groups. First group is known as experimental group and the other group is known as controlled group. So what is experimental group? So experimental group is defined as that group in an experiment in which the independent variable is present, or you can say is being introduced. And on the other hand, controlled variable is that that group in an experiment in which the independent variable is absent. So the group in which independent variable, or you can say treatment, is available, then that is known as our experimental group, and the group in which independent variable is absent, then that is known as controlled group. So we have taken two groups, A and B. So A group is the group in which we have introduced our independent variable, and the B group is known as controlled group in which independent variable is not there, it is absent. So we have taken suppose we take 4 members in both the groups, and we want to see the effect of reward on learning. So for example, we assign 4 members each in both the groups, but we haven't taken care of the other variables that are operating in the experiment. For example, we haven't balanced both the groups prior to the start of experiment. Then what will happen? For example, in one group we have taken people of age group of 25 to 30 years, and in the other group we have taken people of age group between 15 to 20 years. So now we haven't matched both the groups, we haven't made them equivalent prior to the start of experiment. So what will happen here? Age will here age is the example of extraneous variable, because learning is somewhere down the line is dependent on age as well, because as we age, as with the passage of time, our cognitive development is it increases. So and learning is heavily dependent on cognitive development. So in one group we have taken 4 people of age group ranging from 15 to 20 years, and in another group we have taken people of age group ranging from 25 to 30 years. So both the people in both the groups are not comparable. We can't equate them because there is huge age difference. So for example, results we after assigning them, we have given reward to those people who have who was there in experimental group, because here independent variable is present. So reward is our independent variable. So what will happen? So we can't claim, we can't ascertain whether the results, for example, A group has performed better on learning, and A is the group to which we have given reward, and the people that are present in B group, that is our control group, in which independent variable, that is reward, is absent. We haven't given any reward, though we have given, for example, we have given the task of memorizing, or you can say learning a poem of 4 stanza. So we have given the same content, or you can say same poem to learn in both the groups. But the only difference that we have kept is that 4 people that are there in group A, they are being given a different amount of reward. For example, a person is given 50 rupees of reward after learning, then another person is given 100 rupees, then the third person is given 500 rupees, and the fourth person is given 1000 rupees. So reward is given in group A, but in B group we haven't provided any reward whatsoever, though the task is same, that both groups are required to learn a poem, the same poem, but the only difference lies in the independent variable, that is our reward. We have given reward in group A and we haven't given reward in group B. And then after we test their learning, and when we test their learning, for example, results, we have obtained the results that group A, the group, the experimental group A is our experimental group to whom we have given reward. So in results we have noticed that the performance of group A people is significantly higher than the people that are there in our control group, to which we haven't given any reward. So now if we will conclude that reward facilitates learning, because the performance of independent experimental group is better, and then our group B, which is a control group. So if we will conclude that here reward has caused that effect, or you can say here reward has enhanced the learning. So if we will conclude like this, then it will be an error on our part. Why it is so? Because we haven't made both the groups equal. We haven't controlled extraneous variable. For example, age is here extraneous variable. It is very likely that the effect that is there in the performance of both the group, it can be due to age factor, because as I have mentioned, learning is significantly or substantially dependent on age as well, because as we progresses, as we age, our experiences, we grow in experiences, our mental horizon expands. So our learning, the capability, our capability to learn, it also increases with age. So prior to the start of experiment, A group was at advantage. So we have given undue advantage to group A, and B, because we haven't made both the groups equivalent in terms of age. So we can't claim with certainty that whatever effect or whatever difference is there in the performance of both the groups, is it because of age? Is it because of reward? So that is why I said that extraneous variables are the variables that contaminate our findings. So the credibility, or you can say reliability of our results, it is something that is being compromised. So extraneous variables, that is why controlling extraneous variable, here controlling means holding them constant. If we will if we won't hold them constant, or if we let them vary, then what will happen? It will contaminate our results, and it will we will have errors. So this is what extraneous variables are. So any variable except independent and dependent variable, those have an unwanted, undesirable influence on our results. So these are extraneous variables. So now let's come on to the third type of variables, which are organismic variables. So which are organismic variables? So organismic variables are physiological and psychological attributes or characteristics of organisms are known as Organismic variable. For example, let me take physiological attribute. Age, weight, height. These are the example of physiological variables. Or you can say these are not. Apart from that, heartbeat. So these are the physiological variables. Now, then there are certain psychological attributes or characteristics. For example, mood, state of mind, level of motivation, level of anxiety. So these are psychological attributes or characteristics. So what are organismic variables? Organismic variables are physiological and psychological attributes or characteristics of of a subject. These are called as organismic variable in research. So now let's move on to the next type of variable. So the next type of variables are categorical variables. So what are categorical variables? So any variable that varies in types or in kinds are known as categorical variables. For example, let me take an example: gender. Gender is our categorical variable. So gender, how gender is because gender is categorized in male, female. So there is gender is a dichotomous variable. So there are clear-cut categories. So here the difference lies types or kinds. So these categories are mutually exclusive. So this is what categorical variables are. So categorical variables are those variables which varies in mutually exclusive categories, or you can say those variables which varies in types or kinds, those variables which in which qualitative changes occur. So these are categorical variable. Now there is another type of variable, and that is quantitative variable. So quantitative variables quantitative variables are those variable which varies in degrees or in amount. So here the difference or lies in quantity. So they quantitative variables varies in terms of degree, or you can say in terms of quantity. So there is quantitative change, or so they vary in quantity. So that is why they are known as quantitative variables. And quantitative variables are further bifurcated or divided into two parts. So what are the two kind of quantitative variable? The first one is known as continuous variable. So what are continuous variables? So continuous variables are those or you can say continuous variables are those quantitative variables which can take on infinite number of values, which can be arbitrarily measured in infinite number of fineness or exactness. Or you can say in simple words, let me put it in very simple and refined words, this continuous variables are those variables which falls on a continuum, and they can they can go into fraction as well, in decimal point as well. Let me give an example. For example, the weight of a person. So the weight of a person can be for example it can be 65.4 kg, it can be 65.76 kg. So it can go in decimal, it can go in fraction as well. So there is infinite values, it can take infinite values between two numbers, for example 64 and 65. So the weight of a person can vary infinite ways between 64 and 65. So these are the kind of are continuous variables, whereas the second category of quantitative variables are known as are discrete variables. So what are discrete variables? Discrete variables are defined as those quantitative variables which can't take on infinite numbers. They have clear-cut gap. For example, number of family members in a family. So it can be either 2, it can be either 3, it can be 4, it can be 5. So whatever the number of family members, but that number must be in whole number. So family members can't be in fraction or decimal. We can't say that there are 2.5 family members or 2.7 family members. It can be either 1 or it can be either 2 or 3, 4. It will be in whole number. So that are so these are mutually exclusive, whereas our continuous variables are mutually inclusive. So this is what the two type of variables. So quantitative variables are further divided into two parts. First one is our that is our continuous variables. They can take on infinite number of values. They get expressed in fractions or decimals, whereas discrete variables are they are there is clear-cut gap and they can't take on infinite number of values, and they are not expressible in decimal or fraction. They are in whole number. So that is what discrete variables are. So these are the type of variables that we are having in research. So it will suffice for today. Thank you.